Patiently I wait to refill my prescription and count the talk of the drugstore clock. A prototype, they say, to combat my affliction, extra gravity to control me. But that's my fun, and I like fun, and so do you. As we float away, so do you. As we float away. My excellence at parkour is not to be discounted as I leap away and disappear. My excellence at parkour might be unexpected at the age of 58. It comes as quite a surprise, but not to you. We float away, not to you. As we float away.
Awesome. And now, everyone again, let's welcome to Google, John Linnell and John Flansburgh. They might be giants. So I saw that music video for the first time this morning. It was fantastic, and it's got me thinking. I'm curious a little bit about when you are working on a music video or you want a music video for a song. What's the collaboration process like for you and the director? Do you send them a song and sort of give them free range? Is there a back and forth involved?
It's normally that. I mean, we get the best results, it seems like we get are from people who are uncontrollable. And even for the stuff we've done for kids, it's just we've gotten spectacularly great results when the people get to do whatever they want, and they are bringing all this stuff to the song that was not, in our minds whatsoever. Just like utterly, stuff that makes our jaws hit the floor. That's always a great treat for us because normally, we're really used to what we're doing, and our ideas are completely, familiar to us by the time we've ironed them into a product. So it's a really wonderful treat when somebody makes a video.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so this year you're doing another Dial a Song, new song released every week online, and all of them are going to have a music video attached to it as well. And you did this previously in 2015.
Yeah.
So to me, it sounds like releasing 52 songs in 1 year is just this grueling
It's a bad idea.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what made you want to return to it again in 2017 for a second go?
I can't remember. It does seem like a bad idea. The truth is, we started the origin story of the band is really wrapped up in this dial-a-song service that we had that was just a phone machine, And that was a lot easier than the 52 songs in a year thing, actually, perfectly honest, because the sort of the 3-card Monte trick of that was that we had a suitcase full of 40 cassettes, and we would just shuffle them around. And some things would be in rotation, and we would bring in new songs, take out the really miserably bad ones. And, if we went away on tour, my landlady would come in and change them, and it was manageable. This thing is a little bit more. The 2015 Dial Song project was a little bit more about facing the way the world kind of takes in music now. I mean, social media is discovery for a lot of people. Like the only way they find out about things is through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. So if you're not kind of feeding that manic beast all the time, you're really just talking to your front row. Like, you just aren't going to. I guess ultimately, we are always on a quest to find more people to be interested in what we're doing. I mean, we've been doing this for so long that we have to find. We need more people.
Yeah, and so your strategy sort of has been adapting over the years of your career to new ways to find that new audience.
Yeah, I mean, by being able to say, like, on Facebook on any given Wednesday, like, here's a new song. That seems like a much more interesting way of sort of keeping it going.
Mm-hmm. So one of the reasons that I've been sharing a few of the songs that have come out have been previews for the new album I Like Fun, and they've. If you listen to the lyrical content, kind of sounded anything but being about fun.
Yeah.
It's pretty stark contrast.
Mm-hmm.
So just because it's the world that we live in, and it's an album that must have come together in 2017, was that in any part influencing the tone? I mean, you've always been writing music that has some darker tones, but has the world of 2017 at all influenced what became I Like Fun?
I think in a general way, but I mean, they're not specifically topical songs. And there's a lot of death imagery, which is not particularly topical. It's any old time is good for a death.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, one of the things that does sort of come out ultimately when you stack up a big pile of songs is you realize how much you're in the zeitgeist. Like, I don't think you sit down and write a song thinking about, like, I'm gonna write something about right now. But when we do, I remember, at the height of the sort of the Bush era, we made a record, an album that sounded extremely dystopian, for lack of a less political word.
Sure. So this is kind of an unfair question, because it's like saying, where do your ideas come from?
Yeah.
But after...
Oh, we've got answers.
Okay, great. Well, I was going to say, after 20 albums, is the zeitgeist, or where are the places where you keep drawing inspiration for songs, especially since the range of They Might Be Giants song content tends to be a little bit wider than your standard pop?
It's right at the bottom of a cup of coffee. I mean, that is we are truly addicted to caffeine, and it is I don't know.
There isn't an answer. I mean, in a way, if there were, I think we'd be pretty bored with ourselves if we had a calculus for writing songs. I think it would be pretty obvious that that's what we were doing, and we'd be disappointed in ourselves. But we're really, I mean, the job gets harder every year. We are really casting around all the time for something new and meaningful, to say in a song. And that doesn't mean, I mean, they're not these sort of, I suppose it sounds wrong to say they're like these deeply personal statements that we're saying something about, but they are meaningful, and we want to have an idea. That's the point of the song, is to have a good idea and put it out there and have it be fresh and not repeat ourselves. I think the thing about what we're doing is, at this point, it's really obvious to our audience, or to anyone who hears one of our songs who's familiar with us. It's obvious it's us. It's like, clearly this is the kind of thing we do, but we're very scrupulously trying to write a new thing each time, and there's no really simple way to do that. There's no, there's no formula, sadly.
At some point, we realized we were running out of nouns, and we sort of gave ourselves permission to like use the same nouns
Adverbs.
again.
Recycle now.
Yeah, moving on to adverbs.
Right. So I guess when you're putting your tour together for the I Like Fun tour, is that something you're thinking about, is how the new material is going to fit with the old material, how sort of everything fits together?
Yeah. Well, the tour is the beautiful part for us because we have 30 years of backlog. So we have a huge amount of stuff to choose from, and that's the easy part. We've got so many songs. We can just make up. It's Flansburgh's job, and I'm not trying to say it's an easy job, but he does have an enormous backlog of material.
It's a huge responsibility.
It's a big response. The weight on John's shoulders is unbearable. I know that, but it's nice for us. I think that we have so many songs that we can play songs that we haven't played in, a decade, and it's very fresh and fun to pull out something that's from long ago that we're. I don't remember having this idea, but it's sort of exciting to experience it again,
Yeah, like on this tour, we're doing a song. We just got a trumpet player full time in the band for the whole touring act. We've worked with horn players in New York, but it's expensive to like have a whole horn section come out with you. So we figured out like we can clear out the junk bunk in the bus and get a trumpet player in there, and it allows us to do a bunch of songs that are very that have brass in it. So it sort of opens up a whole other kind of song arrangement that we haven't had before. Like we're doing a song called Hey Mr. DJ. I thought you said we had a deal that was like a B-side to Don't Let's Start. And, obviously for the people in the audience, there's like a front row and a back row, and there's very different kinds of, and there are people who've been like dragged there by their friends who are just only so interested in what you're doing. But it is exciting to be able to pull out a song like that and have people in the front really go like, whoa, rather than just have it be like marching out with your, old favorites.
Sure. So it sounds like it's almost this new phase of the band where there's this whole catalog to draw from. I'm curious how that like differs from when you were first touring or first starting out.
Yeah.
And I'd especially be interested, like in New York, since you are, highly associated with the New York music scene.
Right.
Clearly a lot different now from the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the 1980s was a really unusual time, especially in New York, because we came up in this moment where there was a tremendous number of like gatekeepers like protecting the things that made a lot of money. Like we were very aware that like superstar acts were trying to hold on to their market share very, very hard. So even just breaking into like the local club scene was very, there was a lot of like folded arms and a lot of people saying no. And it was very hard to get past that. Like I think it's in 2017, 2018, it's almost impossible to understand how democratized culture has become because of the internet. Mm-hmm. Like people just have to like it and it will suddenly become very popular. There were so many people in the way of anyone even having any idea of what you were doing then. You couldn't even get a gig in a club unless you fit into the idea of that club. So, we're the guys in They Might Be Giants. Like, what club do we work at?
Right.
There is no there. But fortunately, there was this little sort of cultural bubble in the East Village, which was this very transgressive, very druggy scene. But the main thing about the East Village scene that was kind of fascinating. This is like 1984, 85, 86. The clubs were called like the Pyramid Club, 8BC, Dorinka, places that most people have never heard of, but they were an incredible phenomenon at the time. And this is at a time when the New York Times and the New Yorker would not cover shows below 14th Street. No reviews of anything happening, unless it was at the Village Gate. So you're basically talking about like this extraordinary period of sort of siloed off culture. So this bohemian New York scene was happening, and their emphasis, and it was very clear from club owner to club owner, that they only were interested in original acts. So it was suddenly like, instead of being in some college town where like the guy's like, why don't you do Blondie songs? All of a sudden we were in the situation where our originality could really shine and was really emphasized.
Right. I mean, the weird thing about that situation was we were playing in clubs that weren't music clubs; they were performance art clubs. So we were like the normal thing that was being brought in.
Yeah.
Just to play some songs in between some unspeakably weird, impossible to describe thing that was going on.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a time when performance art was like the new thing that was happening.
Right.
Because it really is indescribable. I mean, I think Daryl Hannah in Legal Eagles is the only actual cultural document of performance art that made it through.
So now in sort of this democratized era, how do you fit into that as a more established act, but with a very specific
Well, we are a brand, unto ourselves now, and which we can't that's the way it is now. So I think we're completely also in a different position from a band that's starting out now, where I don't know how you establish yourself at this point. Like we are managing to garner new younger people, but we also have this fan base. So there's a kind of inertia to it that we enjoy. I wouldn't know how. What advice would you give to the starting out?
Save yourself. I don't know. I was doing it. We just started doing interviews again because we're doing this album and tour. And someone was asking me if we considered ourselves a cult band, and I realized I don't even know if that's. I'm so value neutral on the idea of what a cult band is. That really good or is that really bad?
Right. What should I answer?
Yeah. If it's good, yeah. Sure, we're a cult band. I mean, I think, anything that's been around for a long time has an established audience, and the only problem that we have is I don't know. I always felt like we're just another thing in the world. Like we don't have to be the center of your life. I think people tend to think of bands that are left of center as somehow like these as cults. So I guess maybe I feel like I would prefer not to be thought of as a cult band.
Well, I think to me the obvious distinction between us and a cult band is that we don't represent a lifestyle. I hope, because that would be weird. I mean,
this sweater represents a lifestyle.
Yeah.
But that was my personal lifestyle choice.
Right. Stanley Kubrick's personal style choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was gonna say there was a time in somewhere in the 90s where I could see we were playing some big festival-y kind of show, and there were two men in the near front row of the audience, and one guy was wearing a Pearl Jam shirt, and the other guy was wearing a Pearl Jam shirt. And over the course, we were doing a set we were very familiar with, so my mind had time to wander. And I realized at a certain point, one guy was actually wearing the shirt ironically, and the other guy wasn't. And I sort of felt like, that's kind of a good place to be in the culture. That
is the scope.
The world.
Right.
Dudes who wear Pearl Jam shirts.
Of all types.
For all
Yes,
kinds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a diversity move.
Right. We had some interesting chats earlier about technology since we are here at Google, and we have the self-driving car and everything. And I was looking. That's what we have.
Right.
I was looking up.
I thought my car was self-driving.
On the They Might Be Giants wiki I was looking up earlier, just some of the different ways that you've used the internet over the course of your career as a way to distribute music. So in 1999, you released an album only on the internet, back when that was still like a bold, newsworthy move. In 2003, you had a They Might Be Giants streaming internet radio service.
Mm-hmm.
You started podcasting in 2005, long before Serial or any of that took off. So I'm curious what music distribution technologies you're interested in today that in like 6 or 7 years, everyone's just going to think, oh, this is the way to do it.
CD-ROM, I think. We're very excited.
Coming back around.
Yes.
Yeah. It's coming back, man. Don't give up. Laser discs. No, we actually CD-ROMs are the only emerging technology that we completely skipped over. I think because we were right at the point of our deal with Elektra where we realized that this could be our royalty.
We're too stingy, basically.
Yeah, it was just like, if we don't want to be the R&D department for Warner Brothers. But I think we're pretty agnostic about emerging technology. That's the, if there's something coming up, it's really a way to have people hear us. It's just another way to get access to another audience. Like in the past couple of months, I've been actively working on Spotify playlists, and sometimes it's you sort of think you're talking to yourself, but then you realize hey, this has got 250 people are subscribing to this, and that means they're passing it along to X number more people, and if you're open to it, it's it's available to you. I mean, I think the internet thing was something, doing music distribution so early on in the internet, I think really made us aware of what a lost opportunity the early internet was. It was so, the whole Napster moment was such a missed opportunity. There was so much money being made in the music business without the internet that they just were really, they were at loggerheads about how to do it. But it was obvious that it was going to be the way that things were going to go. But nobody in the tall buildings wanted to hear about it.
Yeah. Do you have ways that you prefer to listen to your music, streaming, vinyl, or ways that you think people should be listening to They Might Be Giants?
The mystery of silence.
I feel pretty dumb because I often listen on my laptop, and it's the worst, absolutely the worst way to reproduce music.
John listens to mixes of They Might Be Giants on his laptop.
On my laptop, that's true.
Which drives me insane.
The thing you sent me, I did listen to on speaker.
I know.
Because you asked me to.
I know.
But yeah, I think in a way it's probably not an accident because and you know this, I've always had a kind of a slightly ouchy feeling about the super high and the super lows that were introduced sometime in the 1980s, where before that I felt like the bandwidth
when
of music
sound reproduction became better.
Unbearably good. And before that there was a kind of a narrower range, narrower bandwidth to music, and I felt like it was in the right proportion to my relationship with music. And now it's these super tingly eyes and super crazy. I mean, I feel like such an old man saying this, but it's too much. It's actually Bob Dylan said something to that. He was like, there's just too much sound now, and you can't hear the song anymore.
Wow.
And when you're agreeing with Bob Dylan,
you're an old man. Yeah.
Audiophile stuff.
Yeah.
Perfect. So in a few minutes, we're going to open up to questions from the room. We have 2 microphones if people are interested in queuing up. While people are moving, I do have another question that I'm very curious about. SpongeBob, the musical.
Yep.
So the score for that is many artists contributing different songs.
Yes.
One is contributed by the 2 of you. The New Yorker said that it was the standout track from the show, alongside John Legend and Cyndi Lauper. And
those are the facts.
Yes.
Actual. How did the 2 of you get involved in that project?
We were approached by them, which was great, and I think we were given the choice of 2 possible subjects. We picked the Squidward solo song, and they just took exactly the demo at pretty much verbatim. And I would like to take credit for the whole amazing success, but I think they had the idea of having the squid do a tap dance with all 4 legs, which is, you have to see it in person. It's insane. It looks crazy, and that wasn't us. And that's a big part of why the song just blows everyone away, I think.
Yeah, they turned it into an enormous production number. So
it's
it was nice to sort of see what our thing get amplified that way.
Yeah, that's super cool. So we have a question over here.
Yeah,
Hello.
So, hi. Asking for a friend, what's some good advice to be excellent at parkour at 58?
Asking for a friend. I like that. I mean, this. The song is very much about a fantasy.
I thought you wrote it about me.
I know it. I know. I'm 57.
I'm 58. So I think it's about me. I think the question is addressed to me.
Okay, and please,
Yes.
please,
Calcium. Drink a lot of milk.
I'm
For
answering.
your bones.
I'm answering for a friend.
Yes. Shoulder pads. I don't know. I've never done it. I have no idea. Yeah.
How do people do parkour is my question, because it's like, it is when you see Best of Parkour 2017, it's just like being inside a dream. Also, how do you film parkour? Like, where's that guy?
We can just leave those questions as an exercise for the listener.
Great. Thanks.
I wanted to follow up on the Spongebob question.
I thought you were going to say, I want to follow up on the parkour.
Right. I have answers if you want to approach me later. So you were Aaron was asking you about what's the best medium to listen to your music on, and I feel like a generation younger than me learned about They Might Be Giants through Malcolm in the Middle and that theme song, and now people are learning through Broadway. I'm curious what you think about that, and if you have any stories about failed opportunities or like songs you've written that have the sitcom has been like, no, that definitely doesn't work.
How brutally honest should we be?
Go for it.
We wrote a whole raft of songs for the movie Coraline, which only some of which have ever seen the light of day. And
I think 30 seconds of which were actually in the movie.
30 seconds of which were in the movie, and then there's another song that we released
Yeah.
on an album called "Careful What You Pack," but we wrote a ton of other songs, and I feel it was kind of a bittersweet experience because I think part of it was we were very, we were just producing all this material and throwing it to the director Henry Selick, and he is extremely true blue in his creative process. And I'm not just saying that to be nice. Like, I really respect the guy, but he basically felt like this whole bunch of things that we'd given him were not going to work in his vision, and there just wasn't a way to make it work, and it was upsetting and sad for us, but it's just the thing about collaborating, it's just that's what happens sometimes.
And movies are such a by committee kind of like, it's easier for people to say, prove their value by saying no to something than actually producing something. So it was a weird kind of spanking tunnel of an experience. But it's interesting. Like the Malcolm in the Middle stuff, I feel like I never know. There was a period of time where, like, at 11 o'clock, there was like a rerun of the Mickey Mouse show, the Daily Show, and Malcolm in the Middle, and like I would just be like changing the channels, going like, wow. Like we are completely dominating this medium of television, but at the same time, they're such faceless jobs. I don't think anybody, like with the Daily Show, the credit ran once a week on the Friday when it's going, really fast. Like that's the only time you would ever see our name associated with the show. So it's kind of an invisible. It's interesting to do faceless stuff. I mean, for years we did music for Diet Dr. Pepper, and we did music for Dunkin' Donuts for like 4 years, and it was a super fun job, and nobody knew it was us, which was that.
I think
great.
the Dunkin' one, we were basically hired to do us, So the people who were already familiar with us could probably identify it. My wife heard a commercial and was like, "Oh, I know."
Oh, I would hope your wife would.
She at least identified us. But yeah, we were partly influenced, I think, by stuff that we saw on TV, where we not until 20 years later found out who wrote the Mission Impossible theme or something. So it is a kind of work that you can do, I think, where you're not going to get credit, but you get the satisfaction of doing a good job.
And you can explain yourself to taxi drivers more.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Or your mother's friends.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, how many people here knew that They Might Be Giants did the theme music for The Daily Show?
No one is raising their hands.
You mean you guys didn't like put it into slow-mo on the Fridays?
All right, great. Over here.
First of all, are you guys aware that we wrote the that theme that when your phone rings, that's us? Sorry, go ahead.
I am sorry. I never heard of you guys before.
Not a problem.
But
Daily Show.
Daily Show.
but
Daily Show. iPhone ring, that's us.
yes. But I find you guys to be very witty, and in contrast to your songs, which are a bit dark.
Ah, yes. Well, they're witty as well. They're just dark witty. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't have a musical ear, but my friend does, and I wonder if you can write a line, anything that occurs in your mind, and sign it for me, if this is allowed.
Why don't we circle around afterwards? Sound good?
I have to go for an interview.
Right. I'll make a little drunk for you.
Address it to Katie.
Katie?
K, yeah.
With that C or a K?
K, A,
K.
A, T, I, E.
I-E. Okay, I'm gonna make a little like that. Who else has got a question? Because I can do this at the
Yeah,
Right, we can
here you
do
go. Let's go over to this other mic and have a question while we wait.
So first, I was texted by an old friend today, a very old friend, and he said,
Sign.
"Hey, guess what? I'm going to make you feel old. Flood was released 28 years ago today."
Oh, I heard about
I
that.
was like, "What?" I'm going to go to a talk by They Might Be Giants.
20 years ago today, January 8th.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they released the records they don't believe in January.
Well, it was really meaningful to my friends, to my friend and I. So that was an interesting moment. But I wanted to ask about listening to music on laptops.
Yes.
Because I read something about Dial a Song where you said that forcing to be audible and sensible through a phone.
That is,
style.
I mean, that dovetails into, what we're talking about, because I think it influenced, we've probably said this in the past, it influenced our writing style, that the dial-a-song machine was the most restrictive in terms of bandwidth, and there were even sounds you couldn't make in the song because they would trigger the automatic rewind of the machine. So it was a very, very good discipline.
If there was a long sustained note, it would basically make it reject. So we would even get into doing a thing that's sort of like almost like a DJ thing of if there was like a like I want to know, it would be like I want to know because that would allow it to keep on working.
Plus, just the in order for the lyrics to be audible, and this is another thing that we've always been kind of uptight about, making sure you can hear the words rather than have it be sort of sort of, what did he say?
A vibe.
A vibe, right. That this was another thing about the dial song. The arrangement couldn't be too fussy, and because we automatically like doing fussy arrangements, we had to reel that in. So it's had a huge influence on the way that we write ever since then. And I think we still feel like simple it works
Are the
better.
laptop speakers doing the same thing?
The laptop
laptop
speaker?
speaker.
Yeah, I mean, well, and like I said, I just like sort of a controlled amount of bandwidth when I'm listening. So I think it's all of a piece. This whole aesthetic is kind of connected.
I mean, the opposite that's happening with most people is that there's on earbuds, and that's can be a very full frequency experience. That's much more than hi-fis ever were.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Over here.
Hey, what I started listening to you guys when I was growing up in a place that didn't get much alternative anything, and it was awesome and freeing, and like opened my mind to this whole underground alternative, not what everyone else was listening to and doing world. And okay, A, thank you so much, and you totally changed my life and made it. And B, you're still involved with a lot of experimental and cutting edge and not mainstream or not yet mainstream people and acts and artists. How do you find those people to collaborate with, and where do you get your influences from?
Well, I can answer. I mean, in terms of the video collaboration process, it is very curatorial. I mean, a lot of times we'll simply ask people we've worked with before if they know of anybody. So it sort of spreads out that way, and we also do video contests, which is a strange it's a strange thing in the culture because, you know, when you post a contest, you immediately get responses from sort of angry artists who are like, artists should be paid for their work, and, you know, these contests are just ways of ripping artists off. And I'm very sensitive to that idea in a way, but unfortunately, I'm like too busy writing for a Ford commercial for free to worry so much about it, because it is like it is part of being in the creative community that like the audition never stops, and it is absolutely frustrating. It never stops being frustrating, and I completely understand people being upset about it. But the truth is, through these contests, we find tons of people that we end up working with. I mean, the current contest that we have going, there are 3 winners. So, and we'll probably make other videos with all 3 of them, because it'll just, whatever they do will probably be very interesting and cool stuff. And it's just a way for us to find more. I mean, we got 52 weeks to program, so.
It's funny because I realized I forgot to mention that many years ago, I actually was a winner of the They Might Be Giants video
No way.
contest.
You're kidding.
I forgot to say
What?
that. Yeah.
Which one?
For Omaha, the Omaha venue song.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But are you from Omaha?
I'm not. I'm from Omaha. No, sorry. But we did end up collaborating eventually.
That's
There you
on our way.
nice.
There you go.
Wow,
Right.
that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi. I actually have a question from a friend who introduced me to you guys when I was very little. He's been listening to you for his whole life, so he's curious about your song itself called "Nowhere." If the lyric goes, if it's a thing named "id" at the bottomless pit, or it's a thing named "it" at the bottomless pit, and it's a psychological.
I can
reference.
answer that in a word. It's it.
It's
which,
it.
which rhymes with pit, of course.
Oh yeah, of course.
And
Yeah,
and
we
I,
don't
I also
say
want to
rhyme.
point out, like, we haven't been playing that song for the last 20 years.
I would say 20 years.
We will be playing it on our next tour. We're just
We're
decided to
literally- yeah.
reintroduce, just by coincidence. We are pulling that one out, and we're going to be playing it on the.
And we'll be enunciating it.
That's right. I'll be very clear in my pronunciation.
I'll be sure to tell him that.
You just ended like 40 very vitriolic internet conversations that
Yeah.
have been going on for decades.
Or was it? Maybe.
Right. I thought everyone here had a non-disclosure thing.
Right.
That's right. So is this a question over here? Great.
Hi. So you guys talked a bit about liking to be on the bleeding edge of technology and using new technologies. I'm wondering if there's any new technologies you've seen or heard of sort of floating around now that you haven't gotten to take advantage of yet that you'd like to.
I don't think we've used the word bleeding edge, actually.
Yeah.
Sounds a little-
That's tougher than we are.
Yeah, we're more like just on the near the edge. I think. We're getting hurt.
This is going to sound incredibly spaced out because it's a really spaced out idea. But I was having a conversation with Pete in our office about this yesterday. We have, like a lot of people who do Kickstarter campaigns or do, being in the arts these days requires a lot of there are a lot of patronage schemes that people do, and we started a thing a few years back called the Instant Fan Club, where basically we had been in the studio for 6 months longer than we were planning on. We hadn't been on the road. We just were completely broke, and we actually had to pay a lot of bills. So we thought, let's do some kind of pre-sale for this record, even though it's not going to be out for 3 or 4 months, and at least we won't be broke right now. So we started this thing called the Instant Fan Club and pre-sold 5,000 records and promised a bunch of other stuff and made it a really good value for the people who joined it. And ever since then, we've periodically had these Instant Fan Club things, and it'll be like just really good deals. Like, it's like a bundled thing. You get like $200 worth of stuff for $100 or whatever. And a lot of times there's music exclusives in there. And I was trying to figure out, like in Britain, you do not have to give permission to have your recordings played. You have to grant permission to have your recordings played on the radio. Like, it is not compulsory that if you put a record or a recording into the world, that the radio gets to play it. There's still this moment of sort of like almost fine art possession. Like, this thing exists, and only the artist himself can determine where it goes. And I was wondering, this is really like on the cutting edge of like intellectual property question. Would there be a way to not publish your music, but simply create a disc or create a unique piece of reproduced music, like a CD. I mean, I think of the what was that thing that the creepy pharma dude bought?
Wu-Tang Clan album.
I mean, I was wondering, like, are those compositions at BMI? I would assume not, but like they sold it like a piece of fine art rather than a piece of commercial art, and I'm wondering, like, could we actually pull out of the commercial marketplace and create just fine art music for our benefactors?
For oligarchs.
Yes. And does anybody here know that pharma dude?
Not personally.
Yeah.
Well, thank
No,
you.
anyway. Those are my racing thoughts.
That's a horrible new trend that,
The pharma dude thing.
just the idea that everything is for rich people.
Well, it doesn't. I'm not saying it should be for rich people. I'm just saying it would be interesting to just not have it be something that immediately goes to, I love the streaming services, but I'm telling you, the checks.
It's killing us.
Yeah.
Hello.
It was interesting to hear that your early performances were in these performance art clubs in the East Village, because your early shows also had the concerts had definitely an aspect of performance art to them.
Sure,
Like
yeah.
the huge hats as megaphones.
Yeah.
And the sets were pretty bizarre for concerts at that time.
We were forced to do that stuff.
And I was wondering how much of that was that influence, how much, and it seems like that sort of dropped out of your concert structure more recently. Not, at least, your concerts don't feel as much like bizarre performance art as they did in the early days.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that was intentional, or if that's just sort of how it evolved with the music evolving.
Oh, we evolved. I mean, we worked as a duo for 10 years, and over the course of that time, there was sort of like, some like prop stuff moved into the act, and I mean, I think probably the biggest difference between what we were doing and what like a regular rock band was doing is that we were working with a drum machine. So in some ways, like the props might have sort of been compensating on a theatrical level for what was kind of missing by having a exciting live drummer to watch. I mean, the thing when I reflect on back then is how committed we were to the idea of the drum machine. Like, for a lot of people, I realize now, like, working with a drum machine is a complete wrong answer. Like, that's never going to be good. But at the time, I think we really felt like, we are just rocking so hard, and
Right.
this drum machine is so excellent.
It didn't feel like it wasn't a compromise.
It did not feel like a compromise.
That was
at
the
all.
whole Rhythm Section 1 ad song sort of captured that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're reminding me, like, I think our very earliest shows, before we started doing these East Village performance places, we were playing in showcasey clubs, trying to be like, we played at CBGB as a showcase band, and we were totally using the props and stuff.
Oh, sure.
there,
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it wasn't because, it was more like we found another place where we'd fit in, basically. It was how we ended up in the East Village thing.
But we stopped using them when it became something that people expected, basically. Like, when if it's the first time you've seen a band and they do this thing that's got this really weird theatrical thing to it, it's like, that's interesting. But as soon as it's like, oh, bring out the thing, and it becomes this sort of Rocky Horror Picture tradition thing, it was just like, and that really happened the second time we toured the United States. And we really just, like, suddenly we became this, like, straight no chaser, like, two guys, drum machine, that's all you're getting.
Right. Say the catchphrase.
Right. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Play number 3 again.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you feel like that's something you're actively fighting against, like the mythos traditions of They Might Be Giants? Is something on your mind?
I don't know. I think in some ways we want to keep the spirit alive. The original, we're always trying to get back to the impulse that we started with this. But as John said, we don't want to keep using the same vocabulary over and over.
Sure.
There is a weird thing about how bands kind of turn on themselves in terms of, like, if something is successful for them, they're like, that's the only thing they don't want to do. Like, I think you have to really avoid that just like it's sort of a grumpy thing that
Yeah.
we definitely want to not do.
Totally.
So, with so many years of making music and having this giant repertoire, are there any songs that you've sort of gotten sick of and are like, I just never want to play that again?
Absolutely, yes.
Which ones?
We have to say which ones
You don't have to play
because
them.
we're contractually obligated. No.
Yeah, I think they come and go. I think there's some that we've played a lot that we get tired of, and then there's always the option of rediscovering stuff. So I think that's a nice thing. We have a big enough repertoire that we can shuffle things in and out, and I think we weirdly though I think we still kind of generally like our early material.
I mean, there are definitely songs we don't have to rehearse.
Yeah, that's fun.
It's fun not rehearsing those songs, and it is also fun, like the truth. The energy you get back from an audience when you're playing a popular song. I mean, I saw a recent film of the Rolling Stones, and wow. But I have to say,
wow.
they're still playing Satisfaction, which seems crazy to me, especially since they said they wouldn't. They promised.
Nice. Over here.
Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your kids' albums, actually. I mean, I've been a fan of you guys since college, and I bought Flood on cassette even, and so it's great fun to be able to introduce the band to my kid, and he was a big fan of Here Come the ABCs and Here Come the 1, 2, 3s, and just wanted to hear about sort of what inspired that and what's happening there.
It's a curious thing doing kid stuff because you're kind of immediately declaring that you're a nicer person than you might actually be. I mean, we are guys who were in a rock band, an alternative rock band at a time when you could be extremely selfish, and doing kid stuff, it's like you really have to be extraordinarily nice.
We should say that's on behalf of the parents. The kids actually like the mean attitude.
Yeah.
And they like the swearing, I just want to say. The
Kids,
parents do
kids
not like
love
the swearing.
Yes.
Yes.
But there's sort of like the kids thing. Writing kids music is a really great open invitation to just write about anything. It's it is an enormous trampoline to jump on and just write a song. You talk about how do you keep writing new songs? Having the opportunity to write for kids, I think in many ways really sort of got us revved up again about the whole writing process, because there's no sense of no rock critic is going to talk about your work, when you're writing a kid's song. You're really just writing for yourself and an audience and the audience, and so it's just a very kind of lovely scenario.
Right.
Doing kids shows is something else entirely, and it's very hard to mediate the demands of there are people when we do a kids show, we find out right away that it is both too long and too short, and much too loud and much too quiet. So it's it's a strangely, for something that seems like it could, it's just complicated.
Yeah, kids don't know what they want. That's the problem, So they're impossible to please.
In any case, I'd like to thank you on behalf of many parents for making a lot of long car journeys more tolerable. Because
Oh, thank you.
It's something we could all listen to and enjoy.
They are designed for that. Thank you.
So before we wrap up, I just have one more question. You mentioned Self Called Nowhere is going to come back on this tour. You're looking at other songs in the catalog. Is there any song in particular that you're excited to be playing on the upcoming tour, maybe that you haven't played in a while?
Well, I would say we've got a lot of new material that we're really thrilled to be introducing. That's I mean, for me, that's the funnest thing, is the new stuff.
I like the whole. I'm super psyched about just working with Kurt Ram, our trumpet player, and having long car rides talking about politics with our band. That's yelling at the TV.
Yeah.
Great. Well, so very excited to see you on this tour, and thanks again to John Linnell and John Flansburgh for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent.